growing up with Doug, you know, it was, people would always say, oh, it must be so amazing having a father who's an artist, which it was in so many ways. But in terms of my own drawings and things like that, I just remember being a kid, and I would be drawing and just suddenly feel this presence kind of looking over my shoulder, and realize, oh, he's watching. And then he'd say, oh, let me show you a few tricks. And then he'd basically draw a horse that Rembrandt could have drawn or something like that, which was, I'd say, a little bit intimidating. So I'd usually say, okay, well, I'm going to go out and play baseball, you know. So over the years, I think there were times when I would draw, but keep it a little more secret when I did it. But I think that I learned a lot through osmosis, you know, where when you see somebody drawing who knows what you're doing, you really see how gestural it is and, you know, fluid. But as a kid, I kind of also felt, well, I don't want to, I'm not going to do that as a career, because that's what my dad does, you know. And I in high school, one thing I actually really loved math, and especially geometry. I kind of thought of it as a creative thing. And then it was in the middle of high school, I transferred to Phillips Andover. And one thing I got to do there was they had this thing called February Week each year, where basically you were given a week off from classes, but you were supposed to do a project. And as far as I know, a lot of people just goofed off, but they never checked the project after you were done. But it was during those times that I was able to get my hands on a film camera and shoot some little stop motion movies. And they were very crude and primitive, but I really enjoyed it. And, you know, I think a little seed was planted there, even though I didn't think, oh, well, this is something one would do for a career. But then I had started in college, initially at Carnegie Mellon for a year. Then I took a couple of years off and lived on the Cape year round, and then went back to school at U Michigan. And that was the same year Doug started teaching at Cal Arts. He was dean of the art school there. And he told me about a program they had that was actually teaching animation. So that just clicked instantly, just like, wow, I should check this out. So I applied to Cal Arts and was able to get in. It was, I think at the time, this would be 1977 in the fall is when I started. And that program, it was the experimental film graphics and animation program that I was in. They also had a different part of that school that taught just character animation as really a training ground for Disney. But the experimental film graphics was more oriented toward basically using animation as a personal expression, you know, as if you were, instead of making a painting that you hung on a wall, you were making a painting that moved, or you were doing a cartoon of your own desire that wasn't out of the Disney mold. And that wasn't really up my alley. I tried some character animation one time, and I thought, oh my God, if I have to sit at a desk and draw Mickey Mouse for the rest of my life, I think I'll jump out a window. So, and now, you know, that's changed with the tool set so much. So at Cal Arts, you know, it was really encouraged. It was encouraging there to be in an environment with such creative people. But I think at the time there were only about 10 places in the world you could study animation. And I was lucky enough to have somebody named Jules Engel as my mentor, who had a long history in the industry. He had worked on Fantasia originally. He also did his own personal films, but he worked on a film it was a short film that won the Oscar for animation. I don't know the date, but it was called Gerald McBoing Boing. And one of Jules's specialties was also the color he used in his films. But he was just a great mentor, and the department had equipment. It was really professional equipment, like an animation camera you could shoot your work on. So having that access was wonderful. And I did a few films there as a student, and I stayed on to get my master's degree. And the film I did for my master's, my MFA, was it was in quite a number of festivals, and then it actually won what's called the Cine Eagle, which meant that it was kind of pre-chosen to represent the United States in foreign film festivals. So that was a nice honor. But after school, there's this realization that, oh God, I've got to pay some student loans off and start paying the, or not start paying the rent. I actually taught tennis that whole time. I taught tennis during the school year in, you know, for short periods of time in California. Plus I had been at the Provincetown Tennis Club. So that was sort of paying my expenses most of the time. But although I mentioned student loan, and you know, as much as it was great having tuition at CalArts covered because Doug taught there was still the expense of living, but also paying for making your own films and things. So there were some bills got run up that way. But it had turned out that when the first Star Wars had come out, a number of people from the department at CalArts that came there before me had gotten their first jobs working on the film. And that was in some ways so experimental in nature that they really wanted to draw some people in who just had fresh ideas and, you know, could work on it. So I didn't go there because of Star Wars by any means, but it ended up being this kind of bridge to getting first jobs by connecting with people that had come out of the department before me, not specifically on Star Wars, but it was kind of a link to getting into the industry and getting kind of first jobs. And so for a number of years, I worked in Hollywood. Actually, I was in that area for about 20 years after school, and did a lot of freelancing, doing motion graphics and title design and commercials, and then started to work on some feature films. And so by the early 90s is when I first worked at Disney for about, actually, I take it back, I did work on a project there in 1985, but in 93, I started working on the lot at the studio lot at Disney, and they had just started a new digital film division. And so I think I was the fifth person hired to the group, and that eventually it grew. And it was a great transition. It was kind of, I'd say, really an exciting time because what had happened was Jurassic Park had come out and just turned the industry on its head with this idea that, wow, they can do a digital dinosaur that everybody believes is real. And the whole industry kind of hit the pause button temporarily, thinking, okay, we've got to change or we've got to close down. And some places just said, yeah, we don't want to do this or invest in the technology. And others decided, yeah, this is the future, we've got to do it. So that was just so much fun to change to the new technology and kind of be on the forefront of exploring what it could do. And it was amazing because it had an actual undo button. You didn't have that before. The undo button was basically start over and do it again from scratch, you know. So I was there for a number of years, and then in 1998, I came up to the Bay Area and worked for ILM, and that's where I was until 2019. So a lot of great projects, and it really was an exciting time, I think, to ride this wave of, you know, it was in the film industry, but of course everywhere else, the changes in technology over the time. So when I started, it had been all photochemical and analog, and now it's all being done digitally, and, you know, people go to see a movie, but it's actually a projection of a digital file these days. So hopefully it's pretty all encompassing. I had a very nice experience in there. One of my favorite projects, which actually was I worked on it in 1989, but I was involved in the third and fourth seasons of Pee-wee's Playhouse. And working on that show was just so much fun. But the kind of surprise bonus was then getting an Emmy Award for the work on the title design 2 years later. So that I have really nice memories of that project, and quite a number of others. You know, sometimes the films were just, you kind of got a sense that, well, this might not be the best film I'm working on, but we all have to do the best job we can and, you know, make it look great. And then occasionally you'd work on something just realizing this is a really special project. And part of it was the creative people you're working with too, even if it wasn't the best film in the world, just that group of people you were elbow to elbow with in the trenches finishing the show was fun.